Hi friends, hello, hi, how are you? I hope you guys are having an amazing day today. Hello, hi, how are you? So today's video, I've been really excited about this topic for a long time. I think it's a super interesting thing to analyze and talk about, and that is irrelevancy on YouTube. YouTube as a platform has been around since 2005, and since its creation, it has catapulted normal, everyday people into mega superstars with tens of millions of followers. This has turned, again, normal, oh my god, candle of the day. Candle of the day is champagne, apple, and honey. I have been loving this scent lately. It's getting me very hyped for fall. All I want is fall at this point in time. Anyway, it has turned a ton of normal, everyday people into not only people with massive platforms, massive followings, also turned them into multi-millionaires and has allowed them to reach a level of fame that before YouTube was simply not possible for most people. I think the most interesting thing about YouTube as a platform, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, the most interesting thing about YouTube as a platform is that anyone can do it. Before, in order to be famous, you needed to live in LA or New York City or be actively able to go on auditions to be an actor. But in the wake of YouTube and also just social media in general, you can be a famous person from quite literally your bedroom. You can be running a multi-million dollar company completely by yourself from the comfort of your own home, and that's crazy. It has never been this easy ever to, not that it's easy, but you know what I mean, this easy or attainable to grow a platform of tens of millions of people. So with that being so prominent, especially in our culture today, YouTube and YouTubers becoming way more prominent, what happens with that stardom and that fame and that money? What happens when that starts to fade away? And what makes a YouTuber irrelevant? How do you go from tens of thousands of people paying hundreds of dollars to attend VidCon to meet you? How does that turn into not even being able to get a couple thousand people to click on a video? What happens when you used to be doing millions of dollars in merch sales and now you're struggling to get sponsorships? And also, why does that happen in the first place? That is what I'd like to talk about. Before we jump into the main topic of our video, this video is sponsored by HelloFresh. Hi friends, Editing Me here, and today's video is sponsored by HelloFresh. This is a service that Charles and I started using when quarantine first started, and we have not regretted it for a second. HelloFresh's meals are delicious. This is one of my favorite recipes ever. I'm so happy we filmed this one. It was the Gouda Vibes burger. It is absolutely delicious. One of the best burgers I have literally ever had. I love how flexible HelloFresh is. You can add dinners or lunches to your weekly order. So this week, actually, we ordered a few less dinners than we normally would just because we were going to be out of town. Or you can add more if you know that you're going to be home a ton and cooking a ton more. HelloFresh is also super stress-free and saves so much time. Each meal only takes on average about 30 minutes to make, and it's super stress-free to just know what you're going to have for dinner every night. On top of that, I love how sustainable HelloFresh is because their pre-portioned ingredients cut down our food waste significantly. Charles and I absolutely love HelloFresh. I cannot stress enough. I literally recommend this to my friends all the time, tell everyone about it because the food is just that good and the service is so great. If you're interested in trying HelloFresh, you can go to HelloFresh.com and use Smokey Glow 14 to get 14 free meals plus free shipping. That is Smokey Glow 14 at HelloFresh.com. Thank you so much to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video and also keeping me very well fed. And let's jump into the video. I think what's really important to talk about when we talk about irrelevancy, and I think this is the main preface that this video needs to have because I think that is so important. The term irrelevant is defined as not connected to or relevant to something. And I want to start off this video by saying that I think, especially in social media culture, the word irrelevant is hurled at people like an insult. And honestly, I don't think that that's fair or how we should be utilizing that term. Relevancy on the internet is such a broad concept in the first place that is so hard to quantify and so hard to decide what makes you relevant, what makes you popular, and what makes you unpopular. That's such a hard thing to decide anyway because it's going to be different for every single person. And I think it's heavily debated what could be considered relevant in the first place. So then when you're trying to talk about irrelevancy, it's like, how do you even do that? Number two, I think that honestly, losing relevancy on a platform like YouTube is honestly just a very natural part of the platform. A lot of irrelevant channels are just kind of the natural progression of YouTube itself, subsets of YouTube, like all the different communities, creators themselves. There's so many different things that go into it. And while I think the idea of relevancy or irrelevancy is super interesting to analyze from a content perspective, I also think it's important to note that just because these YouTubers might be coined like fallen off or irrelevant, don't take a shot every time I say irrelevant, only take a shot of water. That's all you're allowed. Even if you have become irrelevant on YouTube, that doesn't mean you're irrelevant as a person. And that's why I wish we would take away sort of the insult of the whole thing, because it shouldn't be insulting that somebody had an incredibly successful career and built up a subscriber base of tens of millions of people, but because they weren't able to maintain that, suddenly their channel and all the work they did put into that means nothing. I think that's kind of stupid. I think we can talk about the analytical side of YouTubers falling off and like hypothesize about why that happened without also saying that they as people are no longer successful or worth anything just because they're not pulling in 10 million views a video. I know firsthand that as a content creator, and I know many content creators who do this, that it is so easy to put your worth into numbers and into analytics, because the way that the YouTube, even just the YouTube homepage, the way that it is set up to make you hyper aware of how your videos are performing against your other videos, how your this month of analytics, how your views are performing versus last month, how much money you made last month versus this month. Like YouTube as a platform and the way that they give creators information breeds this feeling of like, if you're not at your absolute peak performance, that means you're failing. And so in turn, it gives a lot of creators this complex where if they are not doing well enough on their channels, they feel like they as people are failing. It's so easy to fall into this sort of mindset that if you are not at the absolute maximum performance, that you are no longer valuable. And I don't think that's true. And I think we need to take that stigma away from the conversation of irrelevancy. The people we're talking about today, in terms of just having people to sort of reference to when we're talking about different situations, they are more than just numbers on a screen. They're human beings who had careers that had ups and downs, and like that's the end of it. So I just feel like that was important to say, because I don't want this to seem like I'm just picking on people who like maybe aren't as hype as they used to be, because at the end of the day, that is sort of just what YouTube is. It's all about the ebbs and the flows, the peaks and the pits. That is what social media is now and will probably be forever. So I just want to preface it with that. These people are not their analytics, they're not their numbers, and just because their careers may be deemed irrelevant does not mean that they as people are irrelevant. With that being said, the first person I want to talk about as an example of somebody who I think is almost hyper aware of what happened to their channel and all of the kind of downfalls they had, but just can't fix it, would be Graveyard Girl or Bunny on YouTube. I've actually thought about doing an entire evolution of Graveyard Girl, and if you guys want me to do that, I think that'd be a really cool one to do, because she has a very, very interesting story just in and of herself. But I think she's a really good example of an OG YouTuber who just could not make the leap away from what used to be popular. She's not pulling in millions of views anymore or gaining millions of subscribers anymore, not because she's not like a nice person or like her content became bad. The reason that Bunny isn't at the same level of success that she used to be is simply because she couldn't evolve. And for 90% of YouTubers who have fell off, that really is what the problem is. Like that's like 90% of these people is just they couldn't evolve their content. They couldn't evolve to what people wanted to watch. Bunny was kind of at one point in time this gold standard for YouTube in the sense that she had a lot of really creative ideas that she would do. She did the Does This Thing Really Work series where she would buy the like as seen on TV stuff and like try it out. And that got her hundreds of millions of views because at the time that was super new and refreshing and interesting content that millions of people wanted to watch. Those types of concepts combined with her personality is what made her so successful in the first place. But the problem is people got kind of bored. The trends on YouTube shifted away from watching people try crazy gadgets and turned more into wanting story times or more personal content or long form content. And Bunny, unfortunately, unfortunately fell into this trap where she kept trying to make the videos that everybody used to love and everybody used to want to watch. And she kept trying to do that over and over and over again, just hoping that one would hit the algorithm right. And they didn't work. I think the other problem too with this sort of content, and this is a lot of YouTubers that did this, not just Bunny. Like I can think of like Joey Graceffa, Colleen Ballinger, like Tyler Oakley, like these people at a time when YouTube was shifting to more personalized content, more relatable content. At that time, we're still sticking to these sort of overproduced, heavily driven by a concept or a thing videos that made it so they weren't sharing these sort of personal things with their fans. They weren't sharing a lot about themselves. They were still just trying to like review slime or, you know, eat crazy chocolates from different parts of the world. And people had already seen that so many times from them that they got bored with it. And I think a mistake that a lot of these YouTubers made was not jumping on to this sort of relatable trend. And I don't say this because we're going to talk about a little bit later about how there are some kind of like chameleon type creators who are able to change themselves essentially to be what's popular. I don't necessarily think that's a good thing either, but I do think that all of these people like Tyler Oakley, Joey Graceffa, Graveyard Girl, like they were all very likable people in their own way. They had interesting personalities when they did shine through. So I think it's almost sad in a way that they didn't feel like they could be as open and honest and authentic as people that were kind of rising past them, like Emma Chamberlain and Emojo, who were being like brutally honest about themselves and their life. I think a lot of these YouTubers still could have done similar concepts, but just inserted more of themselves into their videos. And I do think that they probably would have had more success that way instead of just trying to sort of beat a dead concept to the ground. Now, Bunny especially, I think is really interesting because she was one of the first YouTubers, I think, who actually talked about the way that this sort of fall off of her channel affected her. She did one of Shane Dawson's, one of his first series actually, where he like went to Texas and tried to help her with her dying channel. And I think Bunny's situation is really sad just because she is aware of the problem and like she knows what she needs to do to fix it, kind of. But I think what's sad, especially in Bunny's case, is that even though she knows those things, that doesn't mean that she can evolve her content to fit what people want from her now. She doesn't seem to have the capacity to fix the problems. And I would argue that that's probably a lot of these YouTubers. Like a lot of the ones I just mentioned, the ones who have fallen off because people just got kind of bored of their content. I think that a lot of them are hyper aware of that. And I think a lot of them wish they could fix it. They just don't know how. The problem is that when the content you're making is so heavily ingrained with who you are as a person or the persona that you created for the camera, it's difficult to switch that up and change it because it's like, what else are you gonna do? You can't just pivot to being like an art YouTuber if you don't know how to frickin' draw. Like you can't always just pivot to what's the most popular if it's not in your skill set. At the end of the day, YouTubers aren't actors, which is why people like them. So if your brand or the things that you like doing or the things that you like creating or your personality isn't considered what's popular at the moment, that is a big reason that YouTubers kind of fall off. And I think that's what's happened with Bunny and a lot of the other people I mentioned. And honestly, I think that this particular type of irrelevancy is just the most common that we're gonna see. Because we're on social media, because people's wants for content is ever changing, because there's not really one set formula that's going to work forever for the rest of time, like we're gonna see more and more these types of creators become less popular than they used to be. That's just sort of the natural progression of how YouTube goes. With that being said, I do think while the majority of people fall into the Graveyard Girl category, I think there are a few other categories that specific YouTubers do fall into. The next category would be the drama starters. What I think is so fascinating about the drama starter category of people who have kind of fallen off on YouTube is that it specifically targets smaller content creators. And I'm not talking like micro content creators, but definitely like smaller, under 1 million content creators. Some of the only people who I see drama hurting their career instead of helping their career. I feel like once you're over 1 million subscribers, and I've done videos talking about this, and I still think it's true, that drama definitely helps people's career, and that especially in beauty YouTube, a lot of the top beauty creators got so popular because of the drama that they were constantly surrounding themselves in. I think on the flip side of that, if you are too small of a content creator and you are too preemptive in your sort of drama stirring ways, I think that it can really quickly kill a channel. There are people like The Rewired Soul, Jordan Byers, and honestly, the most notable person to me that this happened to is Thomas Halbert. They all kind of imploded their careers before they even really got to the peak of what could have been their career because they were incapable of staying out of drama. And when you're a smaller content creator and you don't have a sort of ride or die or big of a fan base, that drama is going to not be seen as like a growing moment. People are gonna get sick of it. And I think Thomas Halbert, frankly, is like the perfect example of that. Thomas Halbert actually got really popular just because he was very sort of like not afraid to speak his mind about brands, and he was very honest about makeup regardless of if he was like on PR lists. He was kind of in that wave of very real beauty YouTubers, which was very refreshing and needed at the time because it seemed like every YouTuber was being bought by Too Faced. So it was very refreshing to see someone like Thomas come on and be always very authentically honest about everything. And then he started getting into all of this drama with honestly much bigger players in the beauty community than himself, but he started getting in all this drama. He got in drama with Jeffree Star and was caught, you know, lying and kind of being two-faced there. It seemed like he was always getting into some type of scandal or some type of problem. And instead of people like living for this the way that at the time they were living for Jeffree Star always being in drama or calling people out, people honestly just saw this as very messy and unprofessional. And honestly, instead of giving him chances the way that bigger YouTubers are often given a lot of chances to redeem themselves and come back from these things, Thomas Halbert wasn't given those chances. He was just in so many scandals that people were like, well, we're just kind of done with this now. And I think the Thomas Halbert situation is so sad because he kind of almost couldn't get out of his own way to just like be successful. Like he just couldn't stop getting involved in drama and getting involved in all these messy situations and pulling himself into things that even when it seemed like he had made genuine changes in his life to not be like that anymore, people were just sick of giving him chances. They felt like they had already given him a lot of chances. If you watch his recent content, he really does seem to have grown a lot and really has tried to stay out of these sort of messy situations that he used to involve himself with. He does seem like a better person, but now nobody cares. Everybody is kind of over hearing him out or hearing his side of the story because when you are a smaller content creator, you can become irrelevant very, very quickly just by getting way too involved in messy situations. I think Thomas also falls into this other category of people that I think are, again, very interesting, but also definitely the minority of people who become irrelevant. I think there's also this category of people who like can't take it. And I think we're thinking of the same person. The like number one person who comes to mind of like they can't take it when they feel like they're starting to become irrelevant. And for me, Gabby Hanna comes to mind, but I think Thomas Halbert also falls into this. I think there are a lot of creators who fall into this where they start to lose followers or views, or they're, you know, something that maybe worked before isn't getting as much success as it is now. And they sort of blame everyone but their own content. I see constantly on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere, people saying that the algorithm is the reason that, you know, their content isn't performing well. And while I will absolutely say, I think that algorithms do play a massive part in if a creator's content is pushed, and while I do know situations where algorithms have absolutely screwed people over like royally, like I'm not saying that's not true. I just also think that a lot of times you can see on the analytics when that's happening because there's a sudden drastic drop or something really, it's not like a gradual slow over time losing things, which is honestly what I see a lot of people who are kind of claiming that the algorithm is the problem. Usually if you look at their analytics or so, it's that they're sort of organically falling off. And frankly, I think one of the biggest turnoffs to your audience is to be complaining about views and numbers and everything like that. I think of course you're gonna have some people who really wanna be supportive and will go out of their way to watch the content for you so that way you can kind of lift up your views. But I think to the majority of people, this just kind of comes across as entitled. And I also think it comes across as not being willing to accept what is sort of inevitable for a lot of YouTubers, which is losing a certain amount of relevancy. And also, honestly, whenever I see YouTubers blaming the algorithm or trying to say that the algorithm is the reason that they're not getting as many views as they once were, underneath that tweet, if you look at any tweets like that, underneath those tweets, always inevitably just a bunch of comments of people being like, hey, I just really was not interested in that last video. Like, I'm not trying to be rude, but I just wasn't interested in it. I almost think the people who kind of fall off because they're not making content that people are interested in anymore and who handle it really poorly, again, it's one of those situations where it's like you almost can't get out of your own way because your subscriber base is usually telling you exactly what they want to watch. They're telling you what they want to see. And because a lot of these creators get so hyper focused on the fact that like they didn't do anything wrong and it's just YouTube screwing them over, they almost put on blinders to the real problem, which is that they just need to be creating content that their audience wants to watch. And while that's easier said than done, they stop listening to the people who got them to where they wanted to be in the first place. Now, I also think another kind of genre of YouTubers who fall off and lose relevancy would definitely be YouTubers who age out of their audience. And I do think this is very different from YouTubers who kind of just had an audience that got bored of their content. I think there's a big difference between getting bored because you're doing the same thing over again and simply like you're making content for kids and those kids turned into adults and they no longer want to watch your content. I did a whole evolution of lifestyle YouTubers where I kind of dived into this topic a little deeper, but I think honestly, this one is the one that makes the most sense to me. It's like the most predictable. And that's why I think people who cater to kids content, I'm like, yeah, you're very smart for doing that because people who cater to kids and make content for kids, without a shadow of a doubt, make the most money on social media platforms. Like if your audience is children, you're making bank. Like you're making very, very, very good money doing that. So while it's like, that's great, that's also definitely the most short-term career path you can go down because kids grow up and they think you're lame now. They cringe at their past selves for ever liking you or your content. And even if you look at people like, I think Jake Paul is a good example and Logan Paul to an extent, because they were two people that solely like their whole audience was 12-year-olds. Like that is who they were just heavily peddling all of their merchandise to. That's who they made all of their songs for. That's who they made all of their content for, was these 12-year-old kids who got them to like 10 million subscribers. So like it definitely worked for them, but now they've had to make drastic career changes in order to maintain any level of relevancy, and they're definitely falling off. I would say Logan Paul's doing much better. He transitioned at a good time and like started his podcast and started sort of trying to get an older audience at the exact right time when he should have. I think Jake Paul tried to cling on to this child fan base for a little too long, and that's why now he's having to resort to being like a Trump Republican who like thinks COVID is fake because he has no other options. The whole pipeline of like YouTube family-friendly YouTubers to like far-right radical Republicans on Twitter, like that pipeline is so interesting to me. Anyway, I think again, out of all the kind of situations that we've talked about here, that one definitely makes the most sense to me. Now, I think those are all kind of the major categories of YouTubers who have fallen off or become irrelevant, but I also think that there's one other specific category that I do think is worth mentioning, but that's sort of YouTubers having comebacks. Because normally for 90% of YouTubers who are struggling with this particular problem of like becoming irrelevant, they're going to sort of have the rise of their channel, the peak of their channel, and then they're going to fall off, and then like that's that on that. However, there are certain YouTubers whose sort of evolution on YouTube looks way more like a roller coaster. Like they have their peak and then they fall off, and then they have another peak and then they fall off, and then they have, like, there are YouTubers who do that, and I would kind of almost call them the chameleons. I think the best example of these YouTube chameleons, I think, is obviously Shane Dawson. Shane Dawson's career, he started making those absolutely horrific parody videos, and that got him to be super popular. Then for a while, he was making these like weird food videos, and so then he shifted again to making these docu-series, and like that was his big thing. And like it's all kind of this roller coaster ride of his career where he's had moments of being the most popular YouTuber on the platform, but he's also had moments where like nobody was watching his videos and people really didn't care about what he was doing. I shouldn't say people didn't care about what he was doing. I guess I should say his numbers were much smaller than what he had seen before. I think the sad part about YouTube, and this is just the truth, is that you kind of do have to be a chameleon, but I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. Like Shane Dawson is the perfect example of that being a bad thing, because he literally just changes his entire personality and thoughts and opinions and based around what's popular. He never talked about conspiracy theories or caring about stuff like that before it was cool to make conspiracy theory videos. And then that's like all he made. And those were his most popular videos. And then all of a sudden he was super into like makeup production the second the makeup industry got super popular. Like he changes himself depending on what's popular. And while that definitely makes you a very successful YouTuber, which is what he was, it also must be exhausting as a person, like to constantly be having to change and evolve your personality to fit exactly what is trending at any given point in time. If your only focus is to do what's popular now, you're always going to be contradicting yourself later. You're always going to have content that you don't actually stand behind as a person. That's just what it is, because you're following the trends of now. Those trends are going to change. I think what all of this sort of leads me to is, how do content creators continue on knowing this, knowing that your job that you're doing, the thing that you really like doing, the thing that makes you your money, the thing that you enjoy for the most part, for most people, how do you exist knowing that that has a time limit? Like, how do you keep creating when you know that tomorrow your brand of personality might just not be what people want to see anymore? And I think there's a few different mindsets that creators have, especially if you're talking to a ton of different creators about this topic. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. I think it's so interesting. I think there's a lot of creators, personally, I feel like this is the category I try to fall into, who are just kind of like riding the wave. And I think that's what happens to 90% of YouTubers, is they know that it's gonna, you know, not be forever. They know YouTube isn't for life. And so they're just like enjoying it while it lasts. They're just having fun and riding the wave. And that's like pretty much a lot of the people I talk to, is we're all kind of like, yep, this could go away at any time. Guess we're gonna enjoy it. Like, there's nothing you can really do about it unless you want to like change your whole personality every 3 years. You just have to kind of enjoy it while you can. Also, kind of plan for an out. Like, I fully have planned for I can only speak for myself here, but I have fully planned in my life to have an out from YouTube one day, and to know that this isn't something I'm going to do for the rest of my life, because that's why I'm getting a degree. Like, I want to be able to do other things too. And like, I think a lot of people feel that way about YouTube. I don't know a single YouTuber, I don't know if I've met one, who was like, yeah, I want to do this till I'm 90. Sorry, I should say 65, because that's like the kind of retirement age usually, is like 65 to 70. I don't think I've met a single person who's like, yeah, I want to do this at 65. Most people don't want to do that. I also think, and this is definitely more hyper specific to bigger creators, because I think this would be way harder to do at like a mid-size level, but I think a lot of bigger creators, they do plan for the end, but instead of just kind of planning for the end and planning to fade into irrelevancy, they're trying to expand their brand and trying to expand themselves into something bigger than just their own personal YouTube channel. I think that's why we're seeing so many influencers come out with makeup brands, skincare brands, clothing brands, candle companies. Like, this is why we're seeing so many people sort of expand away from themselves, because they know that YouTube and their personality might not be forever. However, they could absolutely make a company that could really outlast their career as a social media influencer. Also, by doing that, you have a way of making money and having income, even if views get low, even if your brand of content isn't necessarily what everyone wants to be watching anymore. And if you've done it at a good time, which a lot of these influencers have, you're pretty well established to a point where maybe people are buying from your company and buying from you, even if they don't know you as a YouTuber. I also think there are some YouTubers who their mindset is to just kind of always be evolving. I think, like I said, Shane Dawson's a great example, but also to touch on it again, I think Logan Paul is a good example of that. He saw the sort of rise in popularity in podcasts and saw how many people were getting into them. And he was really on that trend of podcasting before it got super big and super popular. So I do think there are those YouTubers that are really planning to be public figures for as long as they possibly can, and are going to continue to analyze trends and evolve their content for as long as they can to make that happen. And then I also think there's YouTubers who are in the mindset that if they just keep being entertaining, in the sense that if they keep creating drama around themselves, that will help maintain their relevancy. And unfortunately, that has seemingly worked for multiple people up until this point. I can think of a lot of them. It's like you maybe think they're kind of irrelevant, but like they'll come back the second they have a scandal. Jake Paul's a good example of that. Nikocado Avocado is a good example of that. Trisha Paytas. Like there's people who have had very long, very successful careers just by being very scandalous and very drama filled. And unfortunately, that also does work. I guess my final thoughts on all of this are social media is so unique because our success is quantified in a way that it has never been before. Like even me being able to pull out names of YouTubers, I'm like, yeah, I would definitely think they're a little bit more irrelevant now, or like, you know, they've fallen off their channel a little bit. The fact that I can do that, because we do sort of have a metric for what success is based on everybody's channel. You're able to look back at somebody's channel from 3 years ago and see that their views are not as good as they were then. And honestly, that puts influencers in a really bad mental state, I'm sure, because it would be like, imagine if you're like working in a sales job. In 1 month, you just absolutely kill it on commission. Like you sell a ton of stuff, you make a ton of money in commission, you're crushing it. And then the next 3 months, you don't sell as much, you're not doing as well, you're not making as much money. And instead of like your boss being like, hey, you really got to try harder, it's all of your coworkers and everybody who walks in the stores pointing at you and being like, oh, you're the bad salesperson. You're the one who can't make a commission. You're the one who can't make a sale. Like that's what it's like for these YouTubers. And that's why I honestly feel bad talking about it sometimes, because I never want to feel like I'm pointing a finger and saying that that person is just bad. We see irrelevancy as a failure. And instead of seeing it as a failure, I don't know why we don't just see it as the natural progression of a career. Like just because somebody has 10 million followers and now only gets a couple 100,000 views, they still built a brand of 10 million people that at one point in time was getting hundreds of millions of views. Do you know how impressive that is? Do you know how crazy that is? For like an average everyday person to be able to build that type of success for themselves, that is commendable. And just because they couldn't sustain that forever, most of the time not even to a fault of their own, just like how the internet works, and we call them failures, that's lunacy to me. Especially when you consider that that's what's going to happen to everyone. Like every single person is going to have peaks and pits, rises and falls. Even though everybody's sort of, wave might look a little bit different, it's going to happen to every single creator that you watch right now. They're going to fade away and be less popular at some point in time than they may be right now. Actually, when your content is quite literally based on you as a person and your personality. We can't all just change our entire interests and personality based around what would be popular content at that point in time. Anyway, I'm done ranting now, but I thought this topic was really, really interesting, and I'm very interested to know what you guys think. Let me know down below what you think of this topic, what you think about YouTubers who maybe have become irrelevant. Why do you think YouTubers become irrelevant? Let me know what you guys think down below. I'm super curious. I love you guys so much. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like and subscribe, or just subscribe, or do neither. Honestly, just so happy you're watching me. Thank you so much for being here. My merch, my social media, and everything I'm wearing on my face will be linked either in the little products or down below. And yeah, I love you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!